Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today, I want to take you to Monticello on August 25th, 1814. Go inside the stately manor where 71-year-old Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, the third president of the United States, is putting the finishing touches on a letter. Jefferson's letter was a response to a request from a young abolitionist and a fellow Virginian named Edward Coles. Born in 1786, Coles hailed from one of Virginia's finest families. While he was a student at William and Mary, Coles was exposed to the idea that slavery was a moral wrong and a political and legal problem without a clear path to a solution. In 1888, after his father died, Coles inherited land and a dozen enslaved people. This is a real moral challenge for him because the seeds of abolition had been firmly planted and taken hold on his mind. 2 years later, he went to work for President James Madison as a private secretary. During that service as a secretary, Coles wrote the letter to Jefferson. It was on July 31st, 1814. The request to Jefferson was something to sort of help solve this crisis of slavery. In my last video, I read Coles's letter. He basically pleads with Jefferson to do one of two things: either pitch in and help emancipate the slaves, or write something that could be handed down to future generations of America that surely would have to deal with the problem. Well, Jefferson spent about a month after the letter was sent pondering what he would be right, and he wrote his response from Monticello on August 25th. Here's what he had to say to young Coles. Dear Sir, your favor of July 31st was duly received and was read with peculiar pleasure. The sentiments breathed through the whole do honor to both the head and heart of the writer. Mine on the subject of slavery of Negroes have long since been in possession of the public, and time has only served to give them stronger root. The love of justice and the love of country plead equally the cause of these people. And it is a mortal reproach to us that they should have pleaded it so long in vain and should have produced not a single effort, nay, I fear not much serious willingness to relieve them and ourselves from our present condition of moral and political reprobation. From those of the former generation who were in the fullness of age when I came into public life, which was while our controversy with England was on paper only, I soon saw that nothing was to be hoped, nursed and educated in the daily habit of seeing the degraded condition, both bodily and mental, of those unfortunate beings, not reflecting that the degradation was very much the work of themselves and their fathers. Few minds had yet doubted but that they were as legitimate subjects of property as their horses or cattle. The quiet and monotonous course of colonial life had been disturbed by no alarm and little reflection on the value of liberty, and when alarm was taken at an enterprise of their own, it was not easy to carry them the whole length of the principles which they invoked for themselves. In the first or second session of the legislature, after I became a member, I drew to the subject to the attention of Colonel Bland, one of the oldest, ablest, and most respected members, and he undertook to move for certain moderate extensions of the protection of the laws to these people. I seconded his motion and, as a younger member, was more spared in the debates, but he was denounced as an enemy to his country and was treated with the grossest indecorum. From an early stage of our revolution, other and more distant duties were assigned to me, so that from that time till my return from Europe in 1789, and I may say till I returned to reside at home in 1809, I had little opportunity of knowing the progress of public sentiment here on this subject. I had always hoped that the younger generation, receiving their early impressions after the flame of liberty had been kindled in every breast and had become, as it were, the vital spirit of every American, that the generous temperament of youth, analogous to the motion of their blood and above the suggestions of avarice, would have sympathized with the oppression wherever found, and proved their love of liberty beyond their own share of it. But my intercourse with them since my return has not been sufficient to ascertain that they had made towards this point the progress I had hoped. Your solitary but welcome voice is the first which has brought this sound to my ear, and I have considered the general silence which prevails on this subject as indicating an apathy unfavorable to every hope. Yet the hour of emancipation is advancing on by the march of time. It will come, and whether brought on by the generous energy of our own minds or by the bloody process of San Domingo, excited and conducted by the power of our present enemy, if once stationed permanently within our country and offering asylum and arms to the oppressed, is a leaf of our history not yet turned over. As to the method by which this difficult work is to be effected, if permitted to be done by ourselves, I have seen no proposition so expedient on the whole as that of emancipation of those born after a given day, and of their education and expatriation at a proper age. This would give time for a gradual extinction of the species of labor and substitution of another, and lessen the severity of the shock with an operation so fundamental cannot fail to produce the idea of emancipating the whole at once, the old as well as the young, and retaining them here is of those who have not the guide of either knowledge or experience of the subject. For men, probably of any color, but of this color we know, brought up from their infancy without necessity for thought or forecast, are by their habits rendered as incapable as children of taking care of themselves, and are extinguished promptly wherever industry is necessary for raising the young. In the meantime, they are pests in society by their idleness and the depredations to which this leads them. Their amalgamation with the other color produces a degradation which no lover of his country, no lover of excellence in the human character can innocently consent. I am sensible of the partialities with which you have looked towards me as the person who should undertake this salutary but arduous work. But this, my dear sir, is like bidding old Priam to buckle the armor of Hector. Trementibus evo humoris et intutile ferrum singi. Translation: I was girded with trembling shoulders and useless iron. Jefferson continues, no, I have overlived the generation with which mutual labors and perils begat mutual confidence and influence. This enterprise is for the young, for those who can follow it up and bear it through to its consummation. It shall have all my prayers, and these are only weapons of an old man. But in the meantime, you are right in abandoning this property and your country with it. I think not. My opinion has ever been that until more can be done for them, we should endeavor, with those whom fortune has thrown on our hands to feed and clothe them well, protect them from ill usage, require such reasonable labor only as is performed voluntarily by freemen, and be led by no repugnancies to abdicate them and our duties to them. The laws do not permit us to turn them loose, if that were do their good, and to commute them for other property is to commit them to those whose usage of them we cannot control. I hope then, my dear sir, you will reconcile yourself to your country and its unfortunate condition, that you will not lessen its stock of sound disposition by withdrawing your portion from the mass, that, on the contrary, you will come forward in the public councils, become the missionary of this doctrine truly Christian, insinuate and inculcate it softly but steadily through the medium of writing and conversation, associate others in your labors, and when the phalanx is formed, bring on and press the proposition perseveringly until its accomplishment. It is encouraging observation that no good measure was proposed which, if duly pursued, failed to prevail in the end. We have a proof of this in the history of the endeavors in the British Parliament to suppress that very trade which brought this evil on us, and you will be supported by the religious precept, quote, be not wearied in well-doing, end quote, that your success may be speedy and complete as it will be honorable and a moral consolation to yourself. I shall as fervently and sincerely pray, I assure you, of my great friendship and respect. Thomas Jefferson. So what Jefferson said in that longish letter was basically this. There was a time when I was a younger man, I tried to address the question of slavery, but by that time it had been deeply embedded in the colonial culture, and folks had become rather complacent. When I became part of the legislature, I brought it up with an elder statesman. He went to bat, but he was basically brought down. There was no interest in solving the problem of slavery. And then he was busy in Europe from the 1780s through his presidency, didn't have time to really address it, take up the matter, and now he's too old. And as much as he would like to help Edward Coles, he counseled Coles basically to keep his slaves and slowly, quietly, through writing, through conversation, through lobbying, to bring about change in a more peaceful way, through peaceful protest, through letter writing, through politics, to be able to make his points. And only then there might be a gradual emancipation, not emancipation all at once. And until then, take care of the slaves until some future time when emancipation, a gradual emancipation, could be had. That's what Jefferson had to say. He wasn't ready to take it on. He wasn't ready to lend his hand in support. And he wasn't ready to exactly leave behind a document. Although this letter does speak to the idea that he believed at some point emancipation would come, only it wouldn't come during his lifetime, and he wouldn't lift a hand to help to make it happen. So there you have the letter from Thomas Jefferson to Edward Coles, written on August 25th, 1814. You can't help but think that Jefferson's words were eventually realized not by the peaceful, hopeful idea he had that over time it would gradually be worked out, but no, it was worked out in the Civil War. Thanks for listening. See you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.